The moment they found out the value of my retirement package, my daughter Natalie and my son-in-law Adrian came straight to my house. They did not even call ahead. They simply showed up, walked in as if they owned the place, and sat down in my living room with that expression I knew all too well. It was that calculating look that says they are coming for something specific, something they believe belongs to them. Natalie went straight to the point. "Mom, we need to know something. How much are you getting every month from your pension? Because Adrian and I have been thinking, and well, considering we are your family and that we have helped you so much, we believe it is only fair that we share that. We want half." I looked at her in silence. $3,000 a month, I said finally. My voice sounded calmer than I expected. Natalie and Adrian looked at each other, and I saw their eyes light up with that greed disguised as family entitlement. "Perfect," Adrian said, leaning forward. "So that is $1,500 for us every month. It is the minimum after everything we have done for you, Eleanor. You are already older. You do not need that much money." I said nothing else. I simply got up from my chair with all the calm in the world, walked toward the antique cabinet by the window, and pulled out a black binder that had been waiting for this moment for months. It was a thick, heavy binder, full of documents I had prepared exactly for this day. I returned and placed it on the table, right in front of them. Then I handed them that black binder with a tranquility that surprised even me. "Open it," I told Natalie. "I think this answers everything you came to ask me for today." Natalie extended her hand with a confident smile, as if she expected to find the deed to the house or some document confirming her fantasy of controlling my money. Adrian leaned over her shoulder to look as well, and when they opened that binder, when their eyes began to read the first pages, their faces went pale, completely pale. Natalie's smile vanished as if someone had ripped it off her face. Adrian stopped breathing for a full second. I watched as their hands started to tremble, while they turned page after page, reading every document, every piece of evidence, every record I had meticulously compiled. "What is this?" Natalie whispered, her voice breaking. "Mom, what is all this?" Adrian was turning the sheets faster and faster, as if he wanted to find one that did not say what all the others were saying. His eyes were wide as saucers, his face had lost all color, and I could see reality beginning to hit him like waves, getting stronger and stronger. Inside that folder were legal documents with official seals. There were records of every time they had asked me for money and never paid it back. There were exact dates, precise amounts, and conversations I had recorded with my lawyer's permission. There were text messages where they spoke about me as if I were just a source of income, a foolish old woman who did not realize anything. But there was something else. Something that made Adrian drop the papers onto the table as if they burned his hands. "This cannot be legal," he said, his voice hoarse, almost desperate. "You cannot do this. You have no right to." I smiled then. It was a small smile, but loaded with the weight of the years I had spent enduring, staying silent, waiting for the right moment. "Oh, but I can, Adrian. And in fact, it is already done. Everything you see in that binder has already been presented to the proper authorities. It is already signed, sealed, and notarized." Natalie looked at me as if she did not recognize me, as if the woman sitting in front of her were a complete stranger. "But Mom, I am your daughter. How can you do this to me? After everything we have shared, after everything that—" I raised a hand and interrupted her. My voice remained calm, but now every word came out with the force of years of contained pain. "Precisely because you are my daughter, Natalie, you should know better than anyone why I am doing this. You came to my house without warning, entered as if you were the owners, and demanded half of my retirement, half of 40 years of my work, of my sacrifices, of my sleepless nights, as if it were a right you have simply for existing." I stood up and looked down at both of them. For the first time in years, I felt I was recovering something I had lost a long time ago. My dignity, my voice, my power to say enough. That black binder contains the whole truth about who you really are and what you have done. And now you are going to live with the consequences of having treated a 70-year-old woman as if she were worth nothing more than the money you could tear from her. You are going to understand that a mother can love her daughter, but she can also defend herself when that daughter becomes her worst enemy. Adrian tried to stand up, but I raised a finger. "Sit down." I have not finished speaking yet, and to my surprise, he sat. Because in that moment, both of them had just understood something fundamental. The little old lady they thought they could manipulate did not exist anymore. In her place was a woman who had learned to use the law, the truth, and her own intelligence as the most powerful weapons that exist. But to fully understand how I arrived at that moment, in that living room, with that black binder in my hands and that expression of terror on the faces of my daughter and son-in-law, I need to go back to the beginning of it all. I need to return to that morning, just a few weeks earlier, when everything began to crumble in a way I had already sensed but did not want to accept. It was a Tuesday. I remember it perfectly because Tuesdays have always been my days to deep clean the house, to put everything in order, to keep every corner of this home exactly as it should be. I woke up at 6 in the morning as I always do, made my coffee, and sat by the kitchen window to watch the sun begin to illuminate the streets of my neighborhood. There is something in those first moments of the day that has always given me peace. That silence before the world wakes up, when everything is still and you can hear your own thoughts without interruptions. But that morning, even amidst that silence, I felt a weight in my chest I could not explain. A sensation that something was about to change, that a storm was approaching, and I was right in its path. I drank my coffee slowly, letting the heat of the mug warm my hands. At 70 years old, the morning chill feels different. It gets into your bones in a way it did not before. But it was not just the physical cold making me shiver that morning. It was something else. It was the premonition that my life, as I knew it, was about to take a turn from which there would be no going back. The house was too quiet, too empty. I have been living alone since my husband died almost 15 years ago, and I thought I had gotten used to the solitude. But there are days when the silence weighs more than others. Days when you walk down the hallways and can hear the echo of your own footsteps, and you realize no one else is going to arrive to fill that void. Natalie used to visit me more often before. When she was younger, when she had not yet married Adrian, when she still looked at me with something that resembled affection, we would go out on Sundays, she would help me with the groceries, and we would sit and talk for hours. But that was a long time ago. So long ago that sometimes I wonder if it really happened, or if it was just a nice dream my mind created to not feel so alone. I finished my coffee and started with the cleaning. I mopped every corner, dusted every piece of furniture, organized every object that was out of place. My hands moved automatically, doing the same tasks I had done thousands of times over decades. But my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the phone call I had received 2 days earlier. It was from the bank. They informed me that my pension had finally been approved after years of paperwork, of endless red tape, of waiting that seemed to have no end. $3,000 monthly. After 40 years working as a nurse at the city hospital, after double shifts, after sleepless nights attending to patients, after sacrificing my health and my time to help others, I was finally going to receive what was rightfully mine. I should have been happy. I should have celebrated, but instead, I felt fear, because I knew, with that certainty that only years and experience provide, that as soon as Natalie found out about that amount, everything was going to change, and not for the better. I spent the rest of the morning trying to distract myself. I watered the plants in the small garden I have in the backyard. Those plants are the only thing that really gives me joy lately. I watch them grow, bloom, give life, and they remind me that there is still beauty in the world despite everything. Around noon, my neighbor Sarah came to visit me. Sarah is 65 years old and is the only person in this neighborhood who still takes the time to knock on my door just to see how I am. She sat with me in the kitchen while I prepared tea for both of us. "You look worried, Eleanor," she told me while holding her cup with both hands. "Did something happen?" I told her about the pension, about the money I was finally going to start receiving, and about the fear I felt that Natalie would find out. Sarah listened in silence, nodding from time to time. And when I finished speaking, she sighed deeply. "You are right to worry," she said finally. "I have seen how your daughter treats you when she comes around here. I have seen how she talks about you when she thinks no one is listening. Eleanor, you do not owe that girl anything. You have done enough for her. But she is my daughter, Sarah. She is my only daughter." Sarah shook her head. Being a mother does not mean letting them destroy you, Eleanor. Being a mother does not mean turning yourself into a bank they can withdraw money from whenever they want. It is time you set boundaries. Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day. Boundaries. Such a simple word, but so difficult to apply when it comes to your own blood. How do you set boundaries for someone you carried in your womb for 9 months? How do you say no to someone to whom you gave everything from the moment they were born? Evening fell slowly. I sat on the living room sofa, that same sofa where weeks later Natalie and Adrian would sit to demand what did not belong to them. I turned on the television, but paid no attention to what was broadcasting. My mind kept spinning, thinking, planning, fearing. I knew the moment would come soon. I knew my daughter well enough to know that as soon as she found out about the money, she would come. And she would come with demands, with justifications, with that ability she has to make me feel guilty for things that are not my responsibility. When the sun began to set, I got up and went to the cabinet by the window. I opened the bottom drawer and took out an empty binder. A black binder I had bought that same day at the stationery store on the corner. I held it in my hands for a long while, feeling its weight, its texture, its potential. And then I made a decision. If Natalie came for my money, if she came to demand what 40 years of my life had built, I would be prepared. I was not going to let myself be blindsided. I was not going to allow them to make me feel like I was in debt to them simply for being their mother. That night, I did not sleep well. I tossed and turned in bed for hours, listening to every sound in the house, feeling time advance inexorably toward that moment I knew had to come. And when I finally managed to sleep, I dreamed of that black binder. I dreamed it was full of papers, of truths, of justice. I did not have to wait long for my premonitions to come true. Just 3 days after that conversation with Sarah, just 3 days after that night, I decided to prepare for the inevitable. Natalie appeared at my house. But she did not come alone. She never comes alone lately. She always brings Adrian, as if she needs an accomplice to face her own mother. It was around 4 in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing some soup when I heard the noise at the front door. They did not ring the doorbell. They did not knock. They simply walked in, using the copy of the key I had given Natalie years ago, when I still believed my daughter would come to visit me out of love and not convenience. "Mom!" Natalie shouted from the living room. "Are you here? We need to talk to you." The way she said it made me stop what I was doing. It was not a loving greeting. It was not the voice of a daughter coming to see how her mother is. It was the voice of someone coming on a mission, with a specific purpose, with an agenda already prepared. I walked out of the kitchen, drying my hands on my apron. Natalie was standing in the middle of my living room with her arms crossed, looking around as if she were evaluating every object, every piece of furniture, every detail of the decor. Adrian was next to her, with that arrogant posture he always has, as if the whole world owed him something. "Hello, Natalie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I did not know you were coming today." She did not even look me in the eye when she responded. "We do not have to notify you every time we come. Mom, this is our house too. Well, it will be our house someday, right? So we can enter whenever we want." Her words hit me like stones. It will be our house someday. As if I were already dead. As if my life were just a temporary obstacle before they could take over everything I had built with my effort. Adrian moved toward the sofa and dropped onto it without any consideration, stretching out his legs and putting his dirty shoes on my coffee table. That wooden table I had polished and cared for over years. That table that was a gift from my late husband. "Take your feet off there," I told him firmly. "That table is not for resting shoes." He looked at me with a mocking smile, but did not move his feet. "Oh, Eleanor, do not be so delicate. It is just an old table. Besides, soon we are going to change all this old furniture for more modern things. Right, Natalie?" Natalie smiled and nodded as she sat next to him. "Yes, this house needs a complete renovation. This furniture is so outdated. But anyway, we can discuss that later." "Later than what?" I wanted to ask, but I held back. I knew they were going to tell me anyway. I knew they had come with a prepared speech, with rehearsed arguments, with a whole strategy to get what they wanted. I sat in the chair opposite them, keeping my back straight, my hands in my lap. I waited. Sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words, and I had learned over the years that letting people speak first gives you the advantage. Natalie cleared her throat. Mom, we found out something. We found out that your pension was finally approved. $3,000 a month, right? That is a lot of money for a single person. There it was. The real reason for the visit. They did not come to ask how I was. They did not come to see if I needed anything. They came for the money. It was always about the money. It is my pension, I said simply. After 40 years of work, it is what I am entitled to. Adrian leaned forward, his eyes shining with that poorly disguised greed. Of course it is what you are entitled to, Eleanor. No one is saying otherwise. But one must also be realistic. You already have everything you need. This house is paid for. Your expenses are minimal. You do not have great needs. Whereas we have many expenses. We have projects, we have plans, we have a whole life ahead of us. Natalie nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Mom, Adrian and I have been thinking about starting a business, but we need initial capital. And considering we are your family, that we have always been here for you, we thought it would be fair for you to help us. You have always been here for me. I repeated her words slowly, letting each one fall into the air like drops of poison. When was the last time you came to see me without wanting something in return? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was? Natalie frowned. Do not start with that, Mom. You are always on with the same speech that we do not visit you enough. We have busy lives. We have responsibilities. We cannot be coming here every 2 days to hold your hand. Adrian laughed. Besides, you are not that easy to deal with either, Eleanor. You are always complaining about something, always criticizing everything we do. Sometimes it is exhausting being here. His words hurt me more than I wanted to admit, but I did not let it show on my face. I kept my expression neutral, my eyes fixed on them, observing every gesture, every movement, every sign of what they truly were. So, Natalie continued, we have thought that what is fair is for you to give us $1,500 every month. It is half of your pension. With that, we can start our business, and you still keep $1,500 for your expenses. It is a perfect arrangement for everyone. And if I refuse? I asked calmly. The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. Natalie tensed up. Adrian stopped smiling. They looked at each other with an expression I could not fully interpret, but which put me on alert. I do not think you want to refuse, Mom, Natalie said with a voice that tried to sound sweet, but only sounded threatening. We are your family. We are all you have. It would be very sad if, for a little money, you ended up completely alone in this big, empty house. Adrian nodded. Very sad. Why? Who is going to take care of you when you are older? Who is going to be looking out if something happens to you? We are your insurance, Eleanor, and insurance must be paid for. There was the veiled threat, the insinuation that if I did not give them what they wanted, they would abandon me completely, as if their sporadic presence and their visits full of demands were some kind of blessing I should be grateful for. I looked at them for a long moment. I saw my daughter, the girl I had carried in my arms, the baby I had fed from my own body, turned into this woman who now looked at me as if I were just a means to get money. I saw her husband, that man who never worked a full day in his life, who was always looking for shortcuts and easy ways to get what he wanted. And in that moment, I made the final decision. I was not going to let myself be intimidated. I was not going to allow them to turn me into their source of income. It was time they learned what it meant to face a woman who had survived 70 years in this world and who had nothing left to lose. I need to think about your proposal, I told them finally, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. It is a significant decision, and I do not want to take it lightly. Natalie smiled smugly, as if my answer were exactly what she expected to hear. Of course, Mom. Take your time. But not too much, huh? Because the business we want to start has a limited window of opportunity. If we wait too long, we will lose the moment. Adrian got up from the sofa and started walking around my living room as if he were the owner of the place. He stopped in front of the display cabinet where I keep the few valuable things I have. Family photographs, some porcelain plates I inherited from my grandmother, a crystal figurine my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. And this? He asked, pointing to the figurine. How much is something like this worth? It is not for sale, I replied firmly. Nothing in that cabinet is for sale. He laughed. Everything has a price, Eleanor. Everything. It is just a matter of finding the right number. Natalie got up and joined her husband in front of the cabinet. They started talking to each other in low voices, but loud enough for me to hear every word. It was intentional, of course. They wanted me to know exactly what they were thinking. When we sell this house, all this will have to go, Natalie said, examining the objects as if they were trash. Most are just old things without value. But maybe some pieces we can sell on the internet or at some antique shop. Adrian nodded. And this space could be perfect for an office or a game room if we decide to stay and live here instead of selling. Although honestly, this house is in a very old neighborhood. It would probably be better to sell and move to something more modern. Every word was like a blow. They were planning my future without me. They were deciding what to do with my house, with my things, with my life, as if I no longer existed, as if I were just a temporary obstacle on their path to what they considered rightfully theirs. And where exactly do you think I am going to live while you make all these plans? I asked with a voice I barely recognized as mine. It was cold, sharp, full of a contained rage I had been accumulating for years. Natalie turned toward me with a surprised expression, as if she had completely forgotten I was in the room. Oh, Mom, do not be dramatic. Obviously, this is for when you are no longer here. We are not talking about kicking you out on the street. When I am no longer here, I repeated. You mean when I am dead? You are planning my funeral while I am still sitting here in front of you? Adrian rolled his eyes. Do not get so sensitive, Eleanor. We are all going to die someday. It is just common sense to plan ahead. You are already 70 years old. It is not like you have that much time left. His words took my breath away for a moment. Not from shock, but from the absolute lack of humanity they demonstrated. This man was standing in my living room, surrounded by everything I had built with my life, telling me to my face that he was waiting for me to die so he could take over everything. Natalie walked over and sat on the arm of my chair, putting her hand on my shoulder in a gesture I suppose was meant to look affectionate, but only felt condescending. Mom, I understand this can be difficult to hear, but someone has to be practical here. You already lived your life. You already did everything you had to do. Now it is our turn, and the least you can do is help us get a good start. I pushed her hand off my shoulder. Do not touch me when you are telling me my only utility is to give you money and then conveniently disappear from your lives. She sighed with exasperation. Always exaggerating everything. Mom, always playing the victim. No one is saying we do not love you. We are just being honest about the reality of the situation. Adrian returned to the sofa and sat down again, this time putting his feet even higher on my table. Look, Eleanor, let's be clear. You are going to give us those $1,500 every month, and we are all going to be happy. Or you can refuse, and then we will see how well you do when you are truly alone. Because believe me, without us, you have no one. Your friends in the neighborhood are as old as you. Your family is dead or lives far away. We are all you have left. Are you threatening me? I asked directly. Are you threatening a 70-year-old woman in her own house? Natalie laughed, but it was a forced, nervous laugh. Do not be ridiculous, Mom. No one is threatening you. We are just explaining how things are. You need us more than we need you. I stood up then, gathering all the dignity I had left. I think it is time for you to leave. I will let you know when I have made my decision regarding your proposal. Adrian did not move from the sofa. Take your time, but not too much. We have other options if you decide to be difficult. There are assisted living facilities that would be happy to accept you. Of course, you would have to sell this house to pay the monthly fee, but at least you would be taken care of. The threat was clear. Either I gave them what they wanted voluntarily, or they would find a way to declare me incompetent, to make me seem like a senile old woman who could not take care of herself, and thus take control of all my assets. Natalie stood up and stretched as if this whole conversation had exhausted her. Think about it well, Mom. Think about what is best for everyone. Do not be selfish. You do not want to end your last years completely alone, do you? They headed toward the door without waiting for my response. Before leaving, Natalie turned one last time. Oh, and Mom, it would be good if you started thinking about making a clear will too. We do not want legal problems later. It would be better if everything was well specified now, while you are still lucid. The door closed behind them with a loud slam that echoed through the whole house. I remained standing in the middle of the living room, trembling not from fear but from an indignation so deep I felt it burning inside. I walked slowly to the window and watched them get into their car, a new, luxury car they had evidently bought with money they did not have. I saw Adrian say something to Natalie, and both laughed before starting the engine and driving away. They did not want my well-being. They did not care if I was well or unwell. They only wanted my money. They only wanted my house. They only wanted to get rid of me in the most convenient way possible to keep everything I had built over 70 years of life. I sat back in my chair, this time letting the tears finally fall. I cried not out of sadness, but out of rage. I cried because my only daughter saw me as an obstacle. I cried because I had raised someone capable of looking me in the eye and telling me she was waiting for me to die. But after crying, after letting out all that pain, I wiped my tears and made a decision. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play even dirtier. If they believed they could intimidate and manipulate me, they were about to discover they had completely underestimated the woman they had in front of them. I got up, went to the cabinet by the window, and took out that empty black binder I had bought days ago. I placed it on the table and opened it. It was time to start filling it. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose I had not felt in years. It was not revenge I sought. It was justice. It was the need to protect myself from people who clearly had no respect for my life or my well-being. After breakfast, I picked up the phone and called the one person I could trust completely at this moment. Sarah answered on the second ring. "I need your help," I told her without preamble. "And I need this to stay between us." Half an hour later, Sarah was sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea in her hands, listening to me recount everything that had happened the day before. She did not interrupt me once. She only nodded, her expression becoming increasingly serious with every detail I shared. When I finished, she set her cup on the table with a decided clatter. "That girl needs a lesson she is never going to forget, Eleanor. And that husband of hers, too. What do you need me to do?" "I need witnesses," I told her. "I need someone else besides me to know exactly what is happening, because if they try to declare that I am senile or that I am not in my right mind, I need people who can testify otherwise." Sarah nodded immediately. "Count on me, and I know 3 other neighbors who would also be willing to help. We have all seen how your daughter treats you. We have all heard the horrible things she says when she thinks no one hears her." That same afternoon, I called the law firm 2 blocks from my house. I asked for an urgent appointment, and they gave it to me for the next day. I spent the rest of the day organizing all the documents I had. Bank statements showing every time Natalie had asked me for money, receipts for things I had bought for her, phone records, any physical proof that could back up my version of events. I also started writing. I took a notebook and began noting every incident I could remember. Every time Natalie had been cruel to me, every time Adrian had entered my house without permission, every derogatory comment, every veiled insult, every moment they had made me feel like a burden. Dates, times, places, everything my memory could recover. And I discovered I remembered much more than I thought. Years of mistreatment I had been ignoring, minimizing, excusing because I did not want to admit that my own daughter was capable of treating me like that. The next day, I dressed in my best clothes and went to the law firm. The lawyer who attended me was named Catherine Reynolds. She was a woman of about 50, with a serious but kind expression and eyes that made you feel she was truly listening. I told her everything, every detail, every threat, every plan Natalie and Adrian had discussed openly in front of me. Catherine took notes meticulously, without showing surprise or judgment, just pure professionalism. When I finished, she put down her pen and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mrs. Carter, what you are describing to me is financial and emotional abuse, and the veiled threats about declaring you incompetent are very serious. We need to act fast and smartly." "What do you recommend?" I asked. Catherine opened her computer and began typing while she spoke. "First, we are going to prepare legal documents that clearly establish your mental capacity. We are going to do evaluations with doctors who certify that you are completely lucid and capable of making your own decisions. Second, we are going to document the entire history of abuse. Every unpaid loan, every threat, every incident. Third, we are going to review your current will and make a new one that reflects your true wishes. And if they try to stop me? I asked. If they try to declare I am not in my right mind before we can do all that? She smiled, but it was a professional, calculating smile. That is why we are going to move fast, and that is why every step we take is going to be backed by witnesses, official documents, and flawless legal procedures. When we finish, any attempt by them to question your mental capacity is only going to make them look bad. I spent the next 2 weeks in a whirlwind of activity. I visited 3 different doctors, each certifying my complete mental lucidity. I did cognitive evaluations that I passed without any problem. I got written statements from Sarah and 4 other neighbors testifying about my mental state and about Natalie and Adrian's abusive behavior. Catherine worked tirelessly. She prepared documents revoking any power of attorney Natalie might have over my medical or financial decisions. She created a new will where I specified exactly how I wanted my assets distributed, with clauses preventing Natalie from contesting anything. She drafted formal letters, establishing clear boundaries regarding their access to my property. I also installed discreet security cameras in my house. They were not obvious, but they covered all the main areas: the living room, the kitchen, the entrance. Catherine had advised me to visually document any future incident. And then the moment arrived that I knew would come. One afternoon, approximately 3 weeks after their last visit, Natalie and Adrian appeared at my house again. This time they did not even use the key. They simply pounded on the door with force, almost as if they wanted to break it down. I opened the door and found them standing on my porch, both with expressions of poorly disguised irritation. "Enough time has passed, Mom," Natalie said, without even saying hello. "We came for your answer. Are you going to give us the money every month or not?" "Come in," I told them calmly. "I think it is time we had a serious conversation." They entered my living room with that arrogant attitude I knew so well. Adrian immediately went to the sofa and dropped onto it. Natalie remained standing, looking at me with impatience. "So, what is your decision?" she asked, crossing her arms. I sat in my chair, aware that every word, every gesture, was being recorded by the cameras they did not know existed. I kept my voice calm, almost neutral. "I have been thinking a lot about your proposal," I began, "and I have reached some important conclusions." Natalie smiled, clearly believing she had won. "I knew you would come to your senses, Mom. I knew you would not want to end up alone." But I did not let her continue. "I have concluded that you have no right to my money, that your threats are unacceptable, and that your behavior toward me for years has been abusive and manipulative." The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Natalie looked at me as if she had not understood my words correctly. Adrian sat up on the sofa, his expression changing from relaxed to tense in a second. "What did you say?" Natalie asked, her voice dangerously low. I stood up and walked to the cabinet by the window. I took out the black binder, now thick with all the documents I had compiled over the last weeks. I held it in my hands, feeling its weight, feeling the power it represented. "I said you are not going to receive a dime of my pension," I repeated with a firm voice. "And not only that, you are going to stop entering my house whenever you want. You are going to give me back the key you have, and you are going to start treating me with the respect I deserve." Adrian jumped to his feet. "You cannot talk to us like that. You cannot kick us out. We are your family." I walked back to my spot and placed the black binder on the coffee table, right in front of them. I pushed it gently toward Natalie. "Open it," I told her. "I think this answers everything you came to ask me for today." Natalie looked at the black binder as if it were a poisonous snake. Her hands trembled slightly when she took it, and I could see her swallow before opening it. Adrian approached immediately, leaning over her shoulder to see the contents. The first page was a formal letter from my lawyer, Catherine Reynolds, addressed to both of them. It was written in flawless legal language, but the message was clear. It ceased immediately all permissions they had regarding my property, my finances, and my personal decisions. Natalie turned to the second page. It was a notarized document revoking any power of attorney she might have had over my bank accounts. Her eyes moved rapidly over the words, and I watched her face lose color with every line she read. "This has no validity," she said with a trembling voice. "You cannot do this without consulting us." "Oh, but I can," I replied calmly. "And it is already done. Everything was reviewed by lawyers, notarized, and legally registered. Every document in that binder is completely valid." Adrian snatched the binder from Natalie's hands and began flipping through the pages with abrupt, desperate movements. His face turned red when he reached the third section, a detailed record of all the loans they had asked me for over the last 5 years. Every amount, every date, every unfulfilled promise of repayment. There were 17 documented loans. From the $500 Natalie asked me for a supposed medical emergency that never existed, to the $3,000 Adrian urgently needed for a business that never materialized. In total, they added up to more than $23,000 they had never paid back. "This is private!" Adrian shouted, his voice choked. "You have no right to document this like this." "I have every right," I responded, "especially when you came to demand more money without having returned a cent of what I already lent you." Natalie kept turning pages, her breathing increasingly agitated. She reached the section of medical evaluations. 3 certificates from different doctors, all with recent dates, all confirming my complete mental capacity and absolute lucidity. "You went to 3 different doctors?" she asked incredulously. "All this for what? To prove you are sane? To ensure that when you tried to declare me incompetent, as you threatened to do, you would have no legal basis to do so," I explained. "Each of those doctors is willing to testify in court if necessary." Adrian dropped the binder on the table, as if it burned his hands. There were more pages behind, copies of text messages where they spoke about me in a derogatory way, recordings of conversations, all obtained legally, as Catherine had assured me, written and signed testimonies from my neighbors regarding the abusive behavior they had witnessed. And in the last section, the document that truly left them speechless. My new will. They had drafted it with extreme care, making it very clear that the house and all my assets would be donated to charities at the moment of my death. Natalie would receive a symbolic amount of $1,000. Nothing more. "You are disinheriting me," Natalie whispered, her eyes full of tears I did not know were from rage or genuine shock. "I am your daughter. I am your only daughter." "And you treated me like a bank," I responded without emotion in my voice. "You threatened to leave me alone if I did not give you money. You planned to declare me incompetent to take control of my assets. You entered my house and talked about selling it while I was still sitting here listening to you. What did you expect me to do?" Adrian started pacing from one side of the living room to the other, like a caged animal. "This is ridiculous. This is a total exaggeration. We only came to talk about a normal family arrangement. Many families do this. Children help parents. Parents help children." I stood up and looked him directly in the eye. "Helping is voluntary, Adrian. You did not come to ask for help. You came to demand, to threaten, to manipulate. There is a huge difference." Natalie closed the binder with a sharp slap. Her hands shook so much she could barely hold it. "You did this to hurt us, to punish us for asking for what belongs to us." "What belongs to you?" I repeated with disbelief. 40 years of my work belongs to you? My house that I paid for with my own effort belongs to you? My pension that I earned after decades of sacrifice belongs to you?" "I am your daughter," Natalie screamed. "That should mean something. After everything we went through together, is this how you repay me?" I looked at her for a long moment. I saw the little girl who used to sit in my lap and ask me to read her stories. I saw the teenager who came to me when she had problems at school. I saw the young adult who cried in my arms when her first boyfriend hurt her. All those versions of my daughter seemed to have disappeared, replaced by this unknown woman who only saw value in material things. "Being my daughter should mean you love me for who I am, not for what I have," I said with a broken but firm voice. "It should mean you care about my well-being as much as yours. It should mean respect, affection, consideration. But years ago you stopped seeing me as your mother. Now I am just a source of money for you." "That is not true," Natalie sobbed, but her tears did not move me. I had cried too many times alone in this house, wondering where I had failed as a mother, wondering what I had done wrong for my daughter to turn into this. Adrian approached me with an expression that tried to be threatening. "You are going to regret this, Eleanor. You are going to regret having treated us like this. We are going to contest that will. We are going to prove someone manipulated you to do all this." I pointed toward the corners of the living room where the cameras were installed. "Go ahead. Try it. Every word you have said today has been recorded. Every threat, every insult, every attempt at intimidation. If you want to go to court, I will be delighted to present all the evidence I have compiled." Natalie followed my gaze and saw the cameras for the first time. Her expression went from rage to panic in a second. "You have been recording us? All this time you have been recording us without our permission?" "There is a sign at the entrance of my house," I replied. "Small, discreet, but legal. It clearly states the property is under video surveillance. You never bothered to read it because you never bothered to pay attention to anything that was not what you wanted to take from here." The room fell silent, a heavy, dense silence, full of everything we had never said to each other for years. Natalie looked at the black binder as if it were physical evidence of the death of our relationship. Adrian looked at the cameras with an expression of defeat he tried to hide behind his anger. "I want you to leave now," I said finally. "And I want the key to my house before you cross that door." "We are not giving you anything," Adrian spat. "This is still the family house. We will enter whenever we want." I took a step toward the phone on the side table. "If you do not hand me that key right now, I am going to call the police, and I am going to show them this binder, and the video recordings, and the testimonies of my neighbors. Do you want to explain to the police why you are in my house refusing to leave after I have asked you to go?" Natalie searched in her purse with trembling hands. She took out the key and threw it on the table with such force that it bounced and fell to the floor. "Take your damn key. I do not need it. I do not need anything from you." I bent down slowly, picked up the key, and held it in my hand. I felt its weight, its familiar shape. It was a key I had made myself years ago, when I still believed my daughter would come to visit me out of love and not interest. "Now leave," I repeated, "and do not come back unless you are willing to treat me with the respect I deserve." Natalie stood in the middle of my living room, shaking with rage and something that looked like genuine disbelief. Her eyes went from me to the black binder and back to me, as if she could not fully process what had just happened. "You cannot do this to us," she said with a broken voice. "You cannot just kick us out of your life like this. We are your family. I am your blood. Blood does not give you the right to mistreat me," I responded, standing firm. "Blood does not give you the right to my money, to my house, to my life. For years I allowed you to treat me as if I were worth nothing. That ended today." Adrian tried one last tactic. His expression changed, softening artificially. "Look, Eleanor, I think we are all a little upset. Why don't we calm down and talk about this like adults? Maybe there were misunderstandings. Maybe things were said the wrong way." "There were no misunderstandings, Adrian," I said sharply. "You came to demand $1,500 monthly. You threatened to declare me incompetent if I refused. You planned to sell my house while I was still alive. Everything is documented. Everything is recorded. There is no way to reinterpret what you said." Natalie put her hands to her face, and for a moment I thought she was finally going to show some genuine remorse. But when she spoke, her words destroyed any hope I might have had. "This is your fault," she said, pointing at me with an accusing finger. "You made us like this. Always so stingy with your money, always complaining about everything, always making us feel guilty for asking for help. What did you expect, that we would continue treating you like a queen when you never gave us anything?" I looked at her with a mixture of pain and astonishment. "I never gave you anything? I raised you alone after your father died. I worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for your education. I bought you your first car. I paid for your wedding. I lent you money every time you asked without caring if I needed it myself. And you say I never gave you anything? That was your obligation," Natalie screamed. "You were my mother. You were supposed to do those things. You cannot throw it in my face now as if it were some special favor you did me." Her words hit me like punches. Each one was more painful than the last, because they revealed a truth I had been avoiding for years. My daughter truly believed I owed her everything, and she owed me nothing. "You are right," I said finally with a calm that surprised myself. "It was my obligation to raise you, educate you, give you what you needed when you were a child. But you stopped being a child over 20 years ago, Natalie. And at some point, obligations turn into reciprocity, into mutual respect, into love that goes in both directions. But you only learn to take. You never learn to give. Adrian approached Natalie and put his hand on her shoulder. Come on, babe. It is not worth continuing to talk to her. She already made clear what she thinks of us. They headed toward the door. But before leaving, Natalie turned one last time. Her eyes were red, her face distorted by a mix of emotions I could not fully decipher. You are going to regret this, Mom. When you are old and sick and have no one, you are going to remember this moment, and you are going to regret having chosen money over your own daughter. It is not the money I chose, Natalie, I responded with a calm voice. It is dignity. It is self-respect. It is the refusal to continue being treated as something less than a human being. If that means being alone, I prefer solitude to your toxic company. The door closed behind them with a slam that made the walls shake. I remained standing in the middle of my living room, listening to the sound of their car driving away down the street. And then, only then, did I allow my legs to stop supporting me. I let myself fall into my chair, trembling not from fear, but from the release of years of held tension. Sarah appeared at my back door minutes later. She had been waiting in her house, ready to come if I needed her. She found me sitting in the growing darkness of the afternoon, tears running silently down my cheeks. "Did you do it?" she asked softly. "I did it," I replied. "I showed them everything. I gave them the chance to see exactly what they have been all these years." Sarah sat next to me and took my hand. "And how do you feel?" "Free," I said after a moment of reflection. "For the first time in years, I feel free. But freedom has a price." And I was about to discover exactly how high that price was. Because Natalie and Adrian were not going to give up so easily. They were not going to accept defeat without trying to destroy me in the process. During the following days, my phone did not stop ringing. They were unknown numbers, calls I did not answer. They left voicemails, some from Natalie crying, others from Adrian threatening, others from people claiming to be lawyers but clearly were not. Sarah and the other neighbors took turns visiting me, making sure I was never completely alone. I installed new locks on all the doors. I reinforced the house security. I kept my cell phone always charged and with the emergency number on speed dial. A week after the confrontation, I received a certified letter. It was from a different law firm than mine. Natalie and Adrian were suing me. They alleged that I was mentally incompetent, that I had been manipulated by third parties to change my will, that I owed them money for care they had supposedly provided me for years. I took the letter immediately to Catherine. She read it with an impassive expression, making notes in her notebook. "This is exactly what we expected," she said finally, "and we are completely prepared to face it. They have no proof because there is no proof of anything they allege. Meanwhile, we have mountains of evidence demonstrating exactly the opposite." "How long is this going to take?" I asked, feeling the exhaustion in my bones. Catherine looked at me with compassion. "It can take months, maybe more. But Eleanor, I need you to understand something important. You already won. The moment you decided to defend yourself, the moment you said enough, you already won. Everything else is just paperwork." But paperwork was not the only thing I had to face. 2 weeks later, I started noticing something strange. Neighbors who used to greet me now avoided me. People at the grocery store looked at me with expressions I could not interpret. There were whispers when I passed. Finally, a neighbor I had known for years approached me at the bakery. "Eleanor, I need to ask you something. Is it true you kicked your daughter out of your house? That you threatened to disinherit her if she didn't do exactly what you wanted?" I froze. "Who told you that?" She looked away, uncomfortable. "Your daughter has been talking to several people in the neighborhood. She says you have become cruel and controlling, that you emotionally mistreated her for years, and that now you are using your money to manipulate her." There it was, the smear campaign. Natalie was going around the neighborhood, telling her version of the story, painting herself as the victim and me as the villain. And some people were believing her. "And what do you believe?" I asked the neighbor directly. She hesitated for a moment. I don't know what to believe, Eleanor. I've known you for years, but she is also your daughter. Why would she lie about something like that? Why does she want my money?" I answered simply. because I confronted her about years of abuse and manipulation, because I set boundaries she is not willing to accept. The woman nodded slowly, but I saw the doubt in her eyes. Natalie had sown her poison effectively, and now I would have to live with the consequences that some people would never believe my version of events. The weeks that followed were the hardest I had faced in a long time. Natalie's smear campaign intensified in ways I had not anticipated. She did not settle for bad-mouthing me in the neighborhood. She went further, much further. One day, Sarah arrived at my house with a pale face and her phone in hand. "Eleanor, you need to see this," she said with a trembling voice. She showed me her screen. It was a post on social media that Natalie had made, accompanied by a photograph of me from several years ago, where I looked especially tired and gaunt. The text read, "My 70-year-old mother has kicked me out of her life for refusing to give her all my money. During years I have cared for her, visited her, supported her, but now that she got a good pension, she has become greedy and cruel. She is completely alone because she pushed away everyone who loved her. Please pray for her, because clearly she is losing her mind in her old age." The post had hundreds of reactions, comments from people I did not even know, expressing their pity for Natalie, saying how terrible it was that the elderly became so difficult, sharing their own stories about complicated parents. I felt as if I had been hollowed out inside. My own daughter was exposing me publicly, lying blatantly, manipulating the narrative to play the victim. And people believed her. Of course they believed her. It was easier to believe an old woman had become bitter and selfish than to accept that a daughter could be so manipulative. Catherine, my lawyer, called me that same afternoon. "Eleanor, have you seen the posts? We need to document all of this too. It is additional evidence of defamation and her pattern of manipulative behavior." But while Catherine saw legal evidence, I only saw the pain of my own daughter publicly destroying my reputation. Sarah stayed with me that night, refusing to leave me alone. Things got worse before they got better. Adrian started appearing in places where I used to go. At the supermarket, at the pharmacy, at church. He never approached directly, but he made sure I saw him, that I knew he was following me, watching, intimidating. One afternoon, when I left Sarah's house, I found him leaning against my car. He smiled when he saw me, but it was a cold, calculated smile. "Eleanor, we need to talk," he said, blocking my path to the driver's door. "I have nothing to talk about with you," I replied, trying to keep my voice firm. "Step away from my car. I just want you to know Natalie is suffering a lot because of you," he continued, ignoring my words. "She has cried every night. She cannot sleep. She cannot eat. You are destroying your own daughter for money." I took out my phone and started recording. "Step away from my car now, or I call the police for harassment." He raised his hands in a gesture of false surrender, but his eyes remained threatening. Okay, but remember my words. Eleanor, all this is going to end very badly for you. Very badly." He walked away, and I stayed trembling by my car for several minutes before I could gather enough composure to drive home. Immediately, I sent the recording to Catherine, who added it to our growing collection of evidence. But while I was accumulating legal proof, Natalie and Adrian were accumulating their own false evidence. I discovered they had gone to speak with Adult Protective Services, filing an anonymous complaint alleging I lived in unsanitary conditions and was a danger to myself. 2 social workers appeared at my door one morning. They were kind but professional, explaining they had to do a welfare check due to a report they had received. I let them in, my heart beating hard. They toured every room of my house, taking notes, asking questions. My house was spotless, as always. Every surface clean, every object in its place, my refrigerator full of fresh food, my medications organized correctly. After 30 minutes, the lead social worker looked at me with an apologetic expression. "Mrs. Carter, your house is in perfect condition. You clearly are taking very good care of yourself. We are going to close this case as unfounded." "Can I know who made the report?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. She shook her head. "I am sorry. That is confidential. But I can tell you this seems to be part of a family conflict. If you need legal help, there are resources available." After they left, I sat in my living room, and for the first time in weeks, I felt that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Every attempt by Natalie and Adrian to make me look bad was failing. Every lie they told was debunked by the reality of my situation. But they did not give up. The next tactic was even more desperate. Natalie began calling acquaintances of mine from the hospital where I had worked, people I had not seen in years, telling them I was sick, that I needed help, that I was rejecting medical treatment out of pride. Several of my former colleagues called me worried. "Eleanor," Natalie called us, saying, "You are in very poor health, but that you refuse to accept help. Is it true? Do you need anything?" I had to explain again and again that I was perfectly fine, that Natalie was lying, that there was a family conflict she was escalating in increasingly disturbing ways. Some believed me immediately. Others remained doubtful, clearly confused about who to believe. 1 month after the initial confrontation, I received an official subpoena. Natalie and Adrian's lawsuit was proceeding to trial. Catherine and I prepared meticulously. We organized every document, every recording, every testimony. We had a solid, irrefutable case. But the night before the first hearing, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, but something made me answer. "Mom?" It was Natalie's voice, but it sounded different. Broken, vulnerable, like the girl she had been decades ago. "Mom, please, we can fix this. It does not have to go to court. We can talk, we can negotiate something." "There is nothing to negotiate, Natalie," I said, keeping my voice firm despite the pain I felt. "You chose this path when you decided to demand money from me and threaten me, when you decided to defame me publicly, when you decided to try to destroy my reputation. But I am your daughter," she cried. "Are you really going to do this? Are you really going to take me to court?" "You took me first," I reminded her. "I am only defending myself." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Natalie spoke again, her voice had changed. The vulnerability had disappeared, replaced by something cold and hard. "Fine, then see you in court. Mom, and may the best woman win." The line cut off. I remained holding the phone in my hand, feeling the weight of everything I had lost and everything I was about to win. The next day, I dressed in my best clothes and headed to the courthouse. Sarah and my other neighbors came with me, a small army of support. Catherine waited for me at the entrance, with her binder full of evidence and an expression of quiet confidence. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Natalie and Adrian sitting on the other side with their lawyer. Natalie did not look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the table in front of her, her face pale and tense. The judge entered, and the process began. Natalie's lawyer presented first, making allegations about my supposed mental incompetence, about manipulation by third parties, about years of emotional mistreatment toward my daughter. But when it was Catherine's turn, the room changed completely. She presented document after document, audio and video recordings where Natalie and Adrian threatened me clearly. Bank records showing the history of loans never repaid. Recent medical certificates proving my complete lucidity. Testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed the abuse. I watched Natalie sink lower and lower in her chair with every piece of evidence presented. I watched Adrian turn pale when he heard his own voice in the recordings saying things he now could not deny. The judge listened to everything with attention. When Catherine finished, there was a moment of heavy silence in the room. The judge reviewed the documents in front of him for what seemed like an eternity. The silence in the room was so dense, I could hear my own breathing. Finally, he looked up and glanced first at Natalie and Adrian, then at me. After reviewing all the evidence presented by both parties, he said with a firm and clear voice, "I find that the allegations of mental incompetence against Mrs. Eleanor Carter are completely unfounded. The medical evaluations are recent, exhaustive, and conclusive. Furthermore, the evidence presented by the defense demonstrates a clear pattern of manipulation and financial abuse by the plaintiffs." Natalie let out a choked sob. Adrian closed his eyes and clenched his fists on the table. The judge continued. "The recordings and testimonies show the plaintiffs attempted to coerce Mrs. Carter into giving them money through veiled threats. Their subsequent actions, including public defamation and harassment, only reinforce the need for Mrs. Carter to protect herself legally from you. Therefore, I dismiss this lawsuit in its entirety and order the plaintiffs to pay legal costs." He paused, and his gaze hardened. In addition, I am issuing a temporary restraining order. The plaintiffs cannot approach within 100 yards of Mrs. Carter's residence nor make contact with her in any form for the next 6 months. Any violation of this order will result in criminal charges. Natalie stood up abruptly. This is not fair. She is my mother. You cannot forbid me from seeing my own mother. The judge looked at her sternly. You forbade yourself a healthy relationship with your mother when you decided to view her only as a source of income. This order is to protect Mrs. Carter from further harassment and manipulation. If in the future you wish to restore a relationship, you will have to demonstrate a genuine change in your behavior. Case closed. The bang of his gavel resonated in the room like thunder. Catherine squeezed my hand and smiled. Sarah, who was sitting behind me, put a hand on my shoulder. I had won. Not just legally, but in the recovery of my dignity and my right to live in peace. We left the courthouse, and I watched Natalie and Adrian walking away toward their car. Natalie turned once to look at me, and in her eyes I saw something that surprised me. It was not rage or hate, but fear. For the first time, I think she understood the real consequences of her actions. The months that followed were revealing. Through Sarah and other neighbors, I found out how Natalie and Adrian were doing after the court order. Without access to me or my money, their situation began to deteriorate rapidly. The business they were supposedly going to start never materialized because it had never been more than an excuse to get money. Adrian lost his job after his employer discovered he had been missing work constantly. Natalie tried to get loans at several banks, but her credit history was so bad everyone rejected her. They had to move from their relatively luxurious apartment to a much smaller one in a less nice neighborhood. The new car they showed off so much was repossessed for missed payments. Natalie's posts on social media, which previously showed an apparently perfect life, became increasingly scarce until they disappeared completely. I heard Adrian finally had to accept a job in construction, something he had always considered beneath him. Natalie started working at a supermarket as a cashier. They were honest jobs, dignified jobs. But for them, they represented a huge fall from the life they had imagined living with my money. 6 months after the trial, the restraining order expired. I expected maybe to receive a call, a message, some attempt at contact. But nothing came. Weeks passed, then more months, and I still knew nothing of them. A year after all that, I was at the grocery store doing my shopping when I saw her. Natalie was at one of the registers, wearing the store uniform, scanning products with mechanical movements. She looked tired, with deep circles under her eyes, and her hair less cared for than she used to wear it. Our eyes met for a second. I saw something cross her face, a mix of shame, pain, and something that might have been regret, but immediately she looked away and kept working. I got in line at another register. It was not cruelty, but self-protection. I was not ready for that encounter, and clearly neither was she. Meanwhile, my life had taken a completely different course. With the peace of mind that came after setting firm boundaries, I began to truly enjoy my retirement. I joined a group of volunteers at the hospital where I had worked, helping organize activities for long-term patients. Sarah and I started traveling together, small trips to nearby cities, visiting places we had always wanted to see but never had time for. I invested part of my pension in fixing up my house, making it more comfortable and accessible for my years. I also met other women in situations similar to mine. We formed a small support group. We met every 2 weeks to drink coffee and share our experiences. I discovered I was not alone, that there were many mothers who had to make difficult decisions to protect themselves from adult children who saw them only as resources. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter. It had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Natalie. I opened it with trembling hands, not knowing what to expect. The letter was brief. It did not ask for forgiveness directly, nor try to justify what she had done. It simply said, "Mom, I am starting to understand many things I did not understand before. Hard work has taught me lessons I never learned when things came easy. I do not ask you to forgive me now. I just want you to know that I finally see what I did not want to see. I hope you are well. I hope you are happy. Natalie." I put the letter in a drawer. I did not reply. Maybe someday I would, or maybe not. But the fact that she was finally understanding something, even if late, gave me a small measure of peace. Life continued. My house remained my sanctuary. The plants in my garden continued to bloom. Sarah and my other friends continued visiting me regularly. My pension allowed me to live with dignity and comfort, help causes that mattered to me, and enjoy the years I had left without the constant anxiety of being exploited. Did I miss my daughter? Of course. I missed the little girl she had been, the young woman she could have been if she had made different choices. But I did not miss the abuse. I did not miss the threats. I did not miss living in constant fear that they would come to demand more than I could give. One afternoon, sitting on my porch watching the sunset, Sarah sat next to me with 2 cups of hot tea. "Do you ever regret what you did?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my daughter and I reached that point. But I do not regret defending myself. I do not regret having chosen my dignity over her manipulation. Sarah nodded. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. You gave them the chance to change when you handed them that black binder. They chose to fight instead of reflect. That was their decision, not yours." She was right. I had given them a chance to see the truth, to confront their own behavior, to choose a different path. They chose denial and attack. The consequences they faced were the result of their own actions, not mine. Now, as the sun set painting the sky with oranges and pinks, I felt something I had not felt in years: true peace. It was not the peace of having everything resolved perfectly. It was not the peace of a happy family gathered around a table. It was the peace of knowing I had defended my worth as a human being. The peace of knowing I had set healthy boundaries. The peace of knowing the last years of my life would be lived on my own terms. Today I am alone in the sense that my daughter is not in my life in the way I once imagined she would be. But I am not empty. I am surrounded by true friends who value me for who I am, not for what I have. I am full of purpose through my volunteer work. I am at peace with the decisions I had to take. And if someday Natalie knocks on my door with a genuine change in her heart, with real respect and not with demands disguised as filial love, maybe we can start over. But if that day never comes, I will also be okay. Because I learned the most important lesson of all: being alone with dignity is infinitely better than being accompanied by people who treat you without respect. And that black binder I handed them that day not only contained legal documents, it contained my declaration of independence, my silent scream that I would no longer be a victim, my promise to myself that the years I had left would be lived with my head held high. Today I am alone, but for the first time in a long time, I am at peace.